From the Diary of Bill Lowie, Tuesday, October 27th. Today there was a very big troop lift in the very tip of the Delta. All of the ships in the battalion were used. We had 2 gunships go down from small arms fire, one from the 114th and one from the 62nd. No one was injured, although a pilot and another gunship was hit twice in the leg by 30 cal bullets. Over here there is a company of H-37 helicopters that do nothing but go out and sling load downed UH-1Bs from hot areas. So as soon as the battle area in this case was fairly secure, the 37s were called to get the 2 downed gunships. One of the Hueys was down because an oil fire was hit and engine oil was lost. The 37 hooked onto it, lifted it 50 feet and dropped due to a malfunction in the lift. It was a total loss. The second ship was picked up and taken back to Vinh Long. The pilot of this 37 had an engine failure on his approach, so he dropped his Huey about 50 feet off the runway. Then he sat down on it. Not only was the Huey lost, but there was extensive damage to the 37. In this diary entry, Bill Lowie describes the high-stakes reality of recovery missions in Vietnam, especially when aircraft were damaged or destroyed in the field. On this particular day, his unit was involved in a major troop lift in the Mekong Delta, utilizing all the helicopters in the battalion. Despite the careful coordination of operations, the mission saw 2 gunships downed by enemy fire. Thankfully, there were no casualties, although a pilot from another helicopter took 2 hits to the leg. Speaking of that, Poppy once told us how sometimes he and the other pilots would try to sit on their combat helmets to keep from getting shot from underneath. They knew the helicopters couldn't stand up to small arms fire, but their helmets could. Maybe this entry is when he figured that out. Once the area was secure, a group of H-37 helicopters was called in to retrieve the downed UH-1Bs. However, these recovery operations were not without their own risks. The H-37 crew faced complex challenges in retrieving aircraft, especially when working in the middle of a combat zone. Not only did they have to contend with the volatility of the battlefield, with the constant threat of ambush or further attack, but also the weight of responsibility that came with protecting valuable military assets. Recovery missions were high risk, and these units often had to be highly trained and prepared for anything. One wrong move, or an unexpected enemy sighting, could mean the loss of even more lives. But as Poppy's entry illustrates, mechanical failures could still derail even the most skilled of efforts. During this mission, the H-37 helicopter tasked with recovering one of the UH-1Bs managed to lift it about 50 feet off the ground before suffering a lift malfunction. The Huey dropped, shattering upon impact and becoming a total loss. The second H-37's pilot managed to hook onto the remaining downed gunship and carry it back to the base at Vinh Long. Unfortunately, an engine failure during his approach caused him to drop the Huey short of the runway, damaging both helicopters. These setbacks illustrate just how taxing the environment was on machinery, even on specialized recovery aircraft. The early years of the Vietnam War were especially hard on helicopters. These were not just central to American operations in Vietnam. They symbolized the rapid mobility and support essential to the war effort. However, the conditions in Vietnam were far harsher than anticipated. Hueys faced frequent mechanical failures due to the intense mission loads, unfamiliar terrain, and extreme climate. The jungle itself contributed to some of the most common failures. The rotor blades, initially made from aluminum and fiberglass, would degrade quickly, wearing down as they sliced through the thick, humid air and sandy, dust-laden terrain. Dust particles, pervasive in the Vietnamese landscape, acted almost like sandpaper on the rotors, causing issues that could compromise lift and lead to in-flight instability. And while they were designed to be reliable, the Huey's engines initially struggled with the hot, humid conditions, leading to frequent overheating and fuel line ruptures. This kind of damage didn't just lead to emergency landings. It meant more maintenance and downtime, which could severely affect unit readiness. The military responded with several targeted upgrades to improve the helicopter's durability. Engineers developed new, more resilient composite rotor blades to replace the original, extending their lifespan and giving them better resilience against the tough jungle conditions. Improved cooling systems were also installed to handle the frequent overheating issues, allowing the Hueys to function more effectively in low-altitude, high-demand situations. And, as the years went on, specialized support crews were dispatched to maintain these helicopters directly in the field, performing repairs, replacing parts, and ensuring Hueys were back in the air as soon as possible. Additionally, recovery units were set up specifically to retrieve downed aircraft from hot zones, not only to minimize resource losses but also to prevent equipment from falling into enemy hands. Salvaged parts were often used to help keep the rest of the fleet in the air, and recovered helicopters were sometimes repaired if the damage was minimal. These upgrades led to the development of newer models like the UH-1D and the UH-1H, which were specifically equipped to handle the grueling demands of the Vietnam War. In doing so, the Huey became one of the most versatile and reliable helicopters in military history, a true lifeline for troops on the ground. But as Bill Lowie's diary entry makes it clear, the challenges of keeping these aircraft operational were immense, and the efforts of those who flew and maintained them deserve recognition, especially those who did it so early on in the conflict. The photo I chose for today depicts a downed Huey laying sideways in a shallow pool of water. The picture itself is somewhat blurry, a bit hazy, and depicts a refracted rainbow as a glare. Was Poppy walking when he took this? Was he about to get into the air? Was he worried about getting shot but wanted quick proof of this crash? What did he think when he knew that the very things he used to display supremacy on the battlefield were, after all, so fragile, so easily downed? I'm Alex Lowie, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode of Dearest Suzie, and receiving messages from the past that my Poppy wrote exactly 60 years ago. I sincerely appreciate your time and interest. Please consider following the podcast on your preferred platform, and if you're enjoying it, I kindly ask that you take the time to rate the show and leave a review. Also, please follow the project on YouTube, X, and Instagram. All likes, comments, shares, and reviews will help grow the reach of this story. The links for these things should be in the description of this episode. Please feel free to email me at dearestsuziepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to say. I'd love to chat or to hear about your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and God bless.